All right, so it looks like everything is ready to go here. It's 12 o'clock, and wanted to go ahead and get started with today's webinar on do's before do nots. This is an interesting topic, if you ask me. It's the challenge of this last week, the big topic of this last week, and in challenging those athletes out there when they're training, when they're practicing, when they're performing, when they're competing, to use do's, use approach goals, use approach focuses rather than the do not focuses and the don't goals and the don'ts that come into our mind throughout competition. And we'll explain that here in just a little bit further. But the purpose of all of this is really to help athletes understand that do not goals, do not focuses, or focusing on the don'ts inside of competition, they don't help. Focusing on the do's inside of competition, what you want out of the competition, what you want in that moment, is going to help way more than anything else. So let's go ahead and jump right into it today and get started. Throughout the webinar today, just so you guys are aware, keep in mind that you can ask questions. If you do have any questions, go ahead and answer or ask those questions in the chat panel that you have available to you. You can also just get in touch with me at nate.last@gmail.com. Or otherwise. But with that being said, let's go ahead and kind of move right into it. So let's look at this here really quick. So regarding kind of the agenda for the day, we're going to talk a little bit about what the big problem is right off the bat. How using don'ts is taken in our mind, and imagery and kind of how neural pathways work, and then the effect of the attention and what our brains do when we image events, because typically when we're thinking on do's and don'ts, we're also thinking and what we need to we also start kind of imagining those events happening. Outside of that, we're going to go into how to train effective thinking and what you can do to kind of change those don't or that don't mindset into a do mindset. So let's move into it here. Let's see, making sure that everything's running effectively. So what's the big problem? Well, if we start off with this whole idea of we're inside of competition, we're inside of training, we think about things like don't give up, or don't get past, or don't hit left if you're a golfer or a batter or a baseball player, things like that. Don't fade at the end. That might come into your mind. Don't screw up, don't slip, don't miss. These little things come into our head all the time. I want you, in the audience here really quick, inside of that questions panel that you do have available on the control panel there, go ahead and put the big don'ts that come into your mind. What are the don'ts that are coming into your mind while you're training, while you're competing? Is it don't get passed by a certain person? Is it don't fade away? Is it don't screw up? What are the don'ts that come into your mind regarding where your head goes inside of competition? Go ahead and throw those in the questions panel or in the chat panel there. Love to hear what your thoughts are on this. But really a big part of this whole webinar is getting the audience and getting you as an athlete to understand what's going on in your mind, and then what you can do about it, what you can do to change it. We'll come back to that here in just a minute. But the fact is that when we're thinking about don'ts, the interesting thing about our minds is that the brain only really sees the subject or the object of the thing that you're thinking. It doesn't see the don'ts. It just sees the give up, the get past, the fade at the end, the screw up, the slip, the miss. That's all it really sees, which is the big problem here. I mean, if we're going into competition, if we're going into really performance as a whole, and we're thinking in don'ts, all our minds are thinking is the object of those don'ts or the subject of those don'ts, which is probably the negative things that you don't want in the end. However, if we switch our mindsets to do's, to things that we want, rather than give up, it's keep going. Rather than don't get past, it's push farther, push harder, keep your own pace, go back to those process goals. Rather than don't hit left, it's hit it on the green. Rather than don't fade at the end, it's push at the end, push harder at the end, go faster at the end. Achieve something. And again, there's two very different sides to this. There's the negative, there's the don'ts, and then there's always the positives, the do's on the other side of these don'ts. So when it comes to this whole idea, it really has to do mainly with our attention. And our attention is the biggest thing that we have control over within our minds, is where we put our attention within our body. And I actually want to go into that piece right now. Is everybody in the audience, everybody who's listening to this today, I want you to go ahead and quickly just close your eyes. Again, if you're in the car or anything like that, don't close your eyes. Just keep doing what you're doing. But if you're sitting there watching this, I want you to go ahead and close your eyes, and I want you to imagine a little ball of light. A little ball of light inside of your right kneecap, let's say. And inside that right kneecap, I want you to move that little ball of light down through your leg into your foot. Once you do that, bring that ball of light into your toes and let it split into 5 different balls of light. And then bring it back into your foot, merging it into one ball of light again, back through your heel, up through your leg, to the back of your kneecap once again. Now I want you to split that ball and push a ball of light into the left kneecap. And while those little balls of light are floating inside of your kneecaps, I want you to move them back into your hips. Let them join as one at the base of your spine, and then move them up your spine until it reaches the back of your eyes. Let that ball just fill your body up as it goes. Let it light up your body as a whole. You need to take a few deep breaths here really quick now that you have that ball of light behind your eyes. As you breathe, I want you to go ahead and let energy come into your body. Let focus come into your body. Paying attention particularly to your breath again. Letting that ball of light be there. And whenever you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes and come back to the world here. Come back to this webinar. Come back to the current moment. You know, and there's something specific that I want you to understand about this whole exercise. Could you move the ball of light, first of all? In most cases, people can move that ball of light, and especially if they're putting a lot of attention on it or putting their focus on it. If they're in a distracting environment, sometimes, you know, those distractions can pull us away from that little ball of light. But when we're focusing on that ball of light, that is what we have control over in that moment. Right? We don't have really control over anything else outside of that. So, you know, our attention, where we put our attention on a day-to-day basis is most important in all of this. And really what you give power to is what you pay attention on, or what you pay attention to is what you give power to as well. Right? So keep that in mind as we move forward here. Like, if you're thinking in don'ts, if you're thinking don't do this, don't do that, that's what you're putting your attention on. And you're also putting power or giving power to those things, which can be a good thing, but can be a bad thing as well. So, you know, keep that in mind as we move forward here, as we kind of talk a little bit more about this. I want to go to a quick you know, exercise here regarding the pond. Now, I want you to think of yourself as a golfer here. You're sitting on this beautiful green course. You're on the tee box, and you're at this hole. You're approaching your ball. You stand up to it, and you look down the fairway here. And I want you to, in your own mind's eye, in your own interpretation here, what are the first things that you notice when you look at this picture? If you're a golfer. Now, in most cases, people are going to say, well, there's a pond on the right. There are trees on the right. There's rough on the right. And then they look left, and you see, okay, well, there's kind of those bounds on the left. They got the road or the pathway there. You have trees, you have rough, and then at the end there you have a sand trap. Once kind of we see those things, we start kind of honing in on the things that where we want to hit, kind of the green area, I guess you could say, or this area right in here, which is what we want to hit. That's our end-all be-all goal, is hit the ball in this area. But the fact is that in most cases, and tell me if this is true for you in that chat or questions panel there, do you start thinking about the things that you want to avoid, or all the risky things? Or do you think about the things that you want to approach, or the things that you want to accomplish first? Which one do you think first? Now, if you think, the risky, the avoidance things first, that's okay. If you think what you want, the green, where you want to approach to first, that's good too. But the fact is that we really want to, in all cases, no matter what we're thinking about, no matter what kind of situation we're in, we want to think about the approach items before the risk items or the avoidance items, right? So why does this happen? Why does this whole idea of looking at the risky things first happen to us as human beings? The fact is that we have grown up in a society that is all about avoiding risk. You know, we grow up with parents that say, don't do this, don't do that, which is totally understandable because, heck, we want to be safe as much as we possibly can. But when it comes to performance, this whole risk, avoid risk thing that we have in our heads that we've grown up with does not help us accomplish our big goals, does not help us perform up to our true potential, which that's the exciting part about this whole idea is, okay, maybe we did grow up in a society where we were listening to those, avoid risk kind of ideas. But inside of performance, we have the opportunity to choose to engage in what do we want, the approach items before those risk items, because it's a totally different environment. We're not in society anymore. We're in this little game. We're inside of this little competition, inside of this thing that's not all of that other stuff. Right? So we can focus on our performance. We can focus on what we want. We can focus on the things that we can control and not worry about all the risks. Yeah, there's going to be risks, and you're going to think about risks. However, if you want to perform up to your true potential, you want to think about what you want to do before what you don't want to do, right? Or all those risks or all those avoidance ideas. So I want to play a little game here really quick, and if you have the opportunity to, or if you can later on after this video, go ahead and kind of check this out, or if you're watching this now, I want you to go ahead and take out a string. If you have a string and tie a little weight at the end of it, I have a little paper clip. Our minds are one of the most powerful things out there in the world. It's really incredible what our minds are able to do, and we have this capacity to imagine things happen within our bodies, within our minds. It's the mind's eye, however you want to call it. We call it imagery inside of sports psychology. But the fact is that just with our minds, we can actually move objects. Now I want you to try this out. Again, grab your string, and I want you to grab that little weight at the end. Go ahead and tie it in, and I want you to hold it between your thumb and forefinger, just like this. Now when you're holding it between your thumb and forefinger, I want you to just look at that weight. I want you to look at that object at the end of the string, and I want you to focus as intently as you possibly can on making that move left to right. I want you to just imagine it happening, and I want you to look at it as intently as you possibly can, and with intention, again, with those thoughts, what your attention is putting on, I want you to just look at it and see it moving left to right. Now, as you can see, mine's moving quite a long way, and I'm not trying to do this, and that's the interesting part about this whole exercise, is that when we do this, we effectively are sending signals from our intention in our minds through our bodies into the muscles, making that happen. Now, albeit it's a very small signal through our muscle, but the fact is it's making it happen. Now, once you do that for a minute, I want you to go ahead and see if you can change the direction of the weight. I want you to start imagining that weight going forward and backward. And interestingly enough, when we start putting our attention on it and when we start having intent on changing the direction, it all of a sudden starts changing. Now let's see if we can go ahead and move this clockwise here, see if we can revolve it in a circle. Again, not trying to do this, just imagining it and focused as much as I possibly can on moving that in a circle. And then once you do that for a moment, try to reverse the direction. Again, imagine that with all intention that it's moving in the other direction. Not trying to, again, but just imagining it, putting all of your focus on it. Now, that whole exercise, I think, is so integral to the whole idea of sports psychology. Your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, they affect your body. And what affects your body is going to overall affect your overall performance. We know this as a whole. And I think it's just so impactful to realize just how effective your mind is at making your body do whatever it wants to do. And let's bring back the don'ts into this whole idea. If we're thinking don't screw up, don't slip, we are effectively, again, and where our minds are seeing the subject matter, it's saying slip, you're actually sending those signals from your brain to those muscles to screw up, to slip, to hit it left. You're priming those neural pathways to effectively do the wrong thing, which is the whole reason. And I'm harping on this whole, what's the reasoning behind the whole topic for the day. Again, it comes back to that whole idea. You are affecting your body by what's going on through your head. And you know, those don'ts are going to come into our mind all the time. So what do we do? What do we do about this whole issue? And if you find yourself kind of going in the don't mindset sometimes, or into the avoidance mindset sometimes, again, that's okay. But what do we do in order to help train this inside of competition, inside of training? We have to train our minds to do the following. We have to train our minds to think, do, or approach. What do I want before avoidance, or the don'ts, or what do I not want? Right? Because if we can train our minds to think, what do I want first, and then the risk and the avoidance after it, right? Or not at all sometimes, right? We're always going to be able to go after something. We're always going to be able to push. We're always going to set our minds up and our bodies up for, you know, true potential performance, right? Or true performance in the end. So how do we do it is the big question. How do we train our minds in order to think, do before don't? This all comes back to a concept within mindfulness. And mindfulness is something that you might have heard of before, and it's not necessarily within the scope of this specific webinar to teach you what mindfulness is, but the general concept of mindfulness is simply about being aware of what's going on in your head while you're competing or performing or training or practicing, whatever it might be. And when you start practicing or training your mind, think do's before don'ts, what we're trying to be aware of is simply those thoughts, right? Where, you know, what are the things that we think in don'ts? What are the subjects that we think in don'ts? And I want you to really quickly, if you have the capacity, if you're available to, you know, have a paper there, have a journal there, have something in front of you. I want you to write down the big don'ts, just to bring some awareness to them. What are the don'ts that get in your way when you're performing, competing? Write them down on a piece of paper. You know, what are the things that come up most? Is it, you know, if you're an endurance athlete, is it don't get passed by the person behind you? Is it, you know, don't get lapped, or, you know, don't go out too hard, or, you know, don't freak out, or whatever it might be? You know, write down the big don'ts that come into your mind, and everybody's individual here, which is why I can't, you know, get really specific into what the don'ts are, because everybody has their own don'ts that they worry about, right? But what are the don'ts that come into your mind? Now, once you have a good set of those written down, I want you to kind of develop right now in this moment what I like to call a reset function. A reset function is just this ability to, once you're aware that you're having that thought or that don't idea in your head, that you can stop it, that you can do something about it. Mine personally, I like to use a big deep breath. Like as soon as I think in don'ts, I take a deep breath, and then I move forward into my do's, whatever they may be. But sometimes it can be tapping on your head, or clicking your fingers, or slapping your leg, or whatever it might be. Everybody has their own things that they do. But I need you to have something, have some kind of reset function to where if you're thinking something that's not helping you, well, you can do something about it by, you know, tapping your head or snapping, again, whatever it might be, taking a deep breath. Once you have that reset function in, go ahead and take a few seconds, a few moments, however it might be, to reset your focus on the approaches, right? So you wrote down your don'ts, you wrote down the things that are in your mind that don't help you, or the things that you're trying to avoid inside of competition or training. Now I want you to write the opposite of those, whatever they might be. If you're thinking in terms of, you know, don't get passed by the person behind me. Well, rather than thinking that, if you were to refocus on something that you do want rather than don't want, what would it be? Would it be refocusing on your cadence? Would it be refocusing on, you know, keeping the legs, you know, fast and spinning quickly? Would it be focusing on power? Would it be focusing on, you know, catching the person in front of you? Would it be focusing back on the breath? What is most important for you inside of that moment in order to help you accomplish the, you know, the goals that you have? Again, rather than thinking don'ts, which is it's ineffective thinking. What are the do's that we want to refocus on? What are the things that you do want inside of that moment? And there's always going to be an answer here. So write down beside, you know, on the right-hand side of your paper, left, right, whatever it might be, but put down the don'ts, then put down the do's. What are you going to refocus on, right? And then it's simply, now that you have your whole method, right? Here's my don'ts. If I become aware of my don'ts, then I'm going to do my reset function. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to tap my head. I'm going to hit my leg just as a reset. And then I'm going to refocus back on my do's. Right? That's the process of training your mind. Again, being aware of the things that come in your mind that don't help you and doing something about it. That's what mental grit is all about. That's what having this ability to be gritty in your head is all about, is making decisions and doing something about things that you know that don't help you. And don't help us, let's be honest. I'm going to go to a quick thing here really quick. A video that we did yesterday with the Salt Lake Tri Club. Now, this was such an interesting kind of conversation because I challenged everybody inside the Salt Lake Tri Club to this challenge of pick your don'ts or try to change your don'ts to do's throughout the entire week. And this is kind of the conversation that we had. Go ahead and listen to this for just a second, and we'll come back to it here in just a sec.
All right, over here with the Salt Lake Tri Club, we had our challenge this last week of do's before don'ts, of kind of changing our self-talk, and we did our big workout today, and I kind of want to talk to you guys about what do you think in terms of do's when you, or what are the, my goodness, I'm tired. What do you think in terms of like the don'ts that come into your mind, and then what do you switch your don'ts to when you find your thinking in don'ts, right? Steph, what do you typically have with regards to this one?
Don'ts are, today I found out don't let a certain person pass me. Which not ideal, right?
Which that happens, right? It's at a competition.
Right.
Does it help?
Yeah.
In the moment, it kind of does, right?
Until they pass you.
Until they pass you. Then
I want to stop there really quick. I think this is an interesting part right here, is when she's talking about how, it kind of does help sometimes when you're thinking in don'ts. It motivates you in that one moment, right, to push, to go a little bit harder. Don't get dropped. Don't get passed. But then she says something really interesting. If she does get passed, she kind of feels like, oh man, that sucks, I just got passed, and you kind of get that defeated behavior or that defeated feeling, which really does suck. I mean, that's not a great feeling to have, and that's not a performance feeling as well. So having that in mind, looking at this, I just wanted to kind of point that out, how, yeah, sometimes you're going to have those don'ts, and yeah, they are very motivating in the moment. However, a more effective thought pattern is going to be what you want, what you do want in that moment, rather than getting dropped. Let's hear a little bit about what she says.
what happens?
And then it's, I try to hold a certain pace.
All right, so what's your do?
So I think that's really interesting, is that she goes from I don't want to get dropped to I want to just hold this pace. This is in my control. This is who I am. This is where I want to be. So rather than thinking about all these things that are out of her control, she comes back to all the things that are in her control, which is really one of the best things about this whole concept, is we want to bring our focus to things that help us rather than hurt us. Let's go over to Kate here and see what she has to say.
What do you
Keep my turnover high.
kind of refocusing on the process? All right, Kate, what do you typically go to in terms of, what are the don'ts, first of all? What are the don'ts that come in your mind?
If I'm falling behind in my pace, I go on to don't slow down.
Okay.
And then focus on your
All right. So if you think that don't slow down, what do you change your don'ts to?
Maybe focus on something else, where a person in front of me, or
Catching them kind of idea. Makes sense. And that's the big point of training the mental game, is
and I'm going to go right off of that. That really is the whole point here, is, okay, there's those don'ts that come into our mind, but we need to flip-flop to our do's. Kate specifically, she talked about how, don't slow down was kind of one of her don'ts that comes into her mind. So rather than thinking don't slow down, she switches that thought to, catch the person in front of me, or back to her form, is what she kind of said there. Which is, again, going back to what are the things that are completely under her control. Her form is one of those things that are under her control. Okay, so that's kind of the big point of all this today, is, I want you to really practice this idea. You've written down and become aware of the do's, or sorry, of the don'ts, that the things that keep you from moving forward, the things that are really the ineffective thoughts, the don'ts that are coming to your mind. You've written down the things that you can switch your focus to. What are all the things that you have under your control? What are the do's or the opposites of those don'ts? And then lastly, I just want you to simply practice this on a day-to-day basis. I want you to, and I'm challenging you right now is to put that into practice. Have one training day, have one practice day, whatever that might be, dedicated to training your mind, to training these concepts that we're talking about. And if you have trouble, just let us know. We'd love to kind of talk through it with you on giving you a better understanding of how to go about it. But as always, we like to say inside the field, ink it, don't think it. Right? Make sure you write these things down specifically, to become aware of the don'ts, and then to refocus on what are the do's. Right? Write those things down. It will help a ton. To recap this, give power to what you want rather than what you don't want. Put attention on the things that you want to have inside of performance. There's a big problem with paying attention to the don'ts. So don't put attention to the don'ts. Put attention to what you want, to do inside of your performance. There's a lot of priming that's happening between our minds and our bodies. Specifically, when we talked about the whole imagery exercise here, when we're putting our attention on something, we give power to it again, and we can make things happen within our bodies. If we're making things happen, and if our minds are thinking in don'ts, if they're thinking in don't screw up, don't slip, don't hit left, our brains are only really hearing the screw up, slip, and hit left, right? It doesn't see the whole don't. It sees the subject of the conversation. We want to think and approach before avoidance. I talk about this all the time. It's okay to find yourself in that avoidance mindset. It's okay to find yourself in the risk. I don't want to do this, or don't get past, or that don't mindset. It's not necessarily okay to stay there if you know that you're there, because it doesn't help you, especially within your performance, right? So again, switching it over to approach mindset, switching it over to, okay, what do I want to do in this moment, and doing it over and over and over. And lastly, doing the training, completing this challenge on a weekly basis. You're going to get better and better and better at it as you continue to do it, but it's something that you need to do on a weekly or even a daily basis. With that all being said, thank you so much for joining us today with the first of many webinars within Mental Grit. We just want to be able to provide some great tools, some great assets for you as coaches, athletes, and parents to understand the mental game a little bit more. Follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. We're available there at all times. We have events going on a weekly basis. We have challenges going on a weekly basis. I can't wait to hear your stories. If you guys have any questions, again, please let us know. And, get grit, everybody. Have a great week. We'll look forward to hearing from anybody if anybody has any questions again. And with that, signing off. Have a good one, guys. We'll catch you guys later.